We got chickens. But let me start from the beginning. My mom has wanted chickens since we moved into this house, but my dad has always opposed pets of any sort. His motto is, nothing that poops. This includes more children. In light of a recent sickness that I can't name without being demonetized, he changed his mind. His wife and children were bored out of their minds, and chickens would be a perfect way to alleviate some of the boredom. One night, my parents and I sat down and planned all of this out. My dad was there since he would be paying for it. My mom had raised chickens on her family's farm as a child and thought she would be an expert.
You have entered the comedy zone.
Until she realized it had been 30 years and all she could remember was the smell of 75 full-grown chickens in a garage. I was there because I more or less knew what I was doing. I had taken care of chicks at the local hardware store where I worked for nearly 5 years. I knew the basics of being a chicken tender,
The comedy zone.
and my special skill of researching YouTube at 2 times speed would fill in any gaps. My dad agreed to getting 5 chicks, 1 for each kid. My mom said we should get 6 in case one dies. According to her, one always dies. Eventually, I convinced my parents that we should get 7 in case 2 died. Now that we had a plan, we needed to find a coop. One caveat to getting chickens was that my dad would buy the food and chicks, but not a coop. This meant my mom and siblings needed to find a coop for cheap or free. Luckily, some cousins had a coop they wanted to get rid of that could fit up to 10 chickens. When I say coop, I don't mean some little wooden hut with a ramp. This thing is the Homewood Suites of chicken coops. It's big, it's insulated, it has a mirror across the back wall. It's got nesting boxes with drapes. This chicken coop is nicer than my old room. And remember, with every stroke of good luck, there's an inversely proportionate amount of bad luck. Since it's so nice and cost us exactly $0, it literally weighs 500 pounds and had sunk itself 4 inches into the ground. My family spent its Saturday morning digging a chicken coop out of the ground and attempting to lift it onto an old trailer without crushing any children, so my dad could use broken ratchet straps to keep a quarter-ton micro house from flattening whatever car happened to be unlucky enough to be behind us. We got it home without killing anything but my enthusiasm for these chickens. After our lunch break, we unloaded it in the field. Now all we had to do was wait until the chickens were delivered to the hardware store on Friday. Fast forward to Thursday. I'm getting out of the shower and I get hit with this crazy thought, almost a premonition. The chicks are coming today, a day early. I think about how crazy it would be if I'm right, but I shrug it off. Not 20 minutes later, I get a call from Pam at the hardware store. The chickens are coming this afternoon. So this is what being a prophet feels like. I tell my mom and she immediately goes into panic mode. Thanks to quarantine, she was out of Xanax and it was showing. We had originally planned on cutting a 55-gallon drum in half and using that to keep the chicks in. My dad got these big plastic 55-gallon barrels from his job where they used them to store hydrochloric acid. The barrels say they had been triple rinsed before we got them, but the sudden blood rush to my hands after cutting them said otherwise. We ended up using a big water trough my grandparents had laying around the farm, which works much better than the barrel would have. I've heard chickens tend not to lay as much when they're covered in acid burns. Finally, the time came to pick up the chickens. I masked up and braved my way into the hardware store. I meant to take some video of me getting the chickens, but I was in a rush and it wasn't that interesting anyway. I picked out 7 chickens that I thought were 6 different breeds, got some food and a heating lamp and left. I got the chickens home and the kids fell in love. I had chosen Greta, a buff Polish breed. Rowan chose Edna, a golden-laced Wyandotte. Reese chose Keith. We think she's a sex link, which is like a hybrid. Haha. It says link. Mom chose Hilda. Hilda is a brown Americana Easter egger. Claire chose June. We have no clue what breed June is and probably won't until she grows up. Soren chose Gus. We think Gus is a Rhode Island Red. She is the biggest chick and definitely the most food motivated. She was the first one to eat and drink when we brought them home. She ate so much, so fast that her crop got grossly distended. My mom called the vet and he laughed at her and said Gus would be fine. Finally, we have Teriyaki. My dad named this hen.
The comedy zone.
The first night was interesting. My mom and I knew if any of them were going to peck the bucket,
The comedy zone.
this would be the time they would do it. I was afraid that they would get too cold. I checked on them around 11 p.m. and they seemed fine though. It was as cold as it would get that night and none of them had died. It was a good sign. They might survive the night. Morning rolls around and I wake up at noon, not to the sounds of crying children. It was a good sign. I forced myself out of bed to check on the chicks. There are 7. They are all still alive. They made it through the first night. Huh. We had banked on losing a couple. Cool. It's been a week so far and the chicks are doing great. Their fluffy down is quickly being replaced by feathers and soon they will enter the beautiful, dinosaur-like phase of chicken adolescence as they get well on their way to chicken womanhood. After a couple of days, we gave them the opportunity to hang out in the grass. They loved it. Chicks are super curious and love to peck and dig and explore. Just look at them. And might I just say, Hilda do be looking kinda thick though. Through my extensive minutes of double speed YouTube research, I found out that chickens can be easier to train than dogs. When people are learning to train service dogs, some teachers will have their students start with a chicken since they are so trainable. What my research didn't tell me was that they don't train so easily when they're babies. I knew I would have to start simple anyway, so I tried to teach them up. All this is supposed to mean is walk onto my open palm so you can be picked up. You train them by picking them up, letting them stand on your hand, and giving them food for it. Eventually they learn to just walk onto your hand, and then you can slowly phase out the food reward. Easy, right? Not when they are babies. I've been working with this one and others for days now, and they still can't get this. Because of the current national situation, my summer should be pretty free. Hopefully I will be able to continue documenting the chick's growth and development and making videos out of it. Finally, the most important skill to know when keeping chickens.